Welcome back to the parillaworks channel. My name is John. I had a semi-free day in the shop waiting for some glue and finish to dry, so I decided to make a mallet. I've made a few mallets before, one of which was an early video on this channel. That mallet was fun to make and works well for hitting things, but it's a bit tough to control. I want to make a smaller mallet that is easier to control for finer tasks like chisel work. I started with a piece of 2x2 Cocobolo I keep on hand for custom ring boxes I make from time to time. I cut a small chunk at the miter saw to use for the mallet head. I made both the head and the handle on the lathe, so that means my handle tenon will be round. I cut the mortise in the head at the drill press using a 1-inch Forstner bit. Then I cut the corners off the head blank at the table saw and finally got the blank set up in the lathe. The mallet head is pretty simple. I started by turning the blank round and then marking my ends. The head would be about 6 inches long, so I measured 3 inches out from the center to either direction. Then I turned the ends down to a diameter of 1.5 inches using a little half circle jig from my chair build. Once I had the ends at the correct diameter, I could create a soft taper working from the middle out. I'm using carbide tools for all of this and switched between a square rougher, square radius rougher, and a round scraper. I got the piece to where I wanted it and moved on to sanding. And then I decided to alter the design a bit. I wanted to make the back end of the head a smaller diameter. This would give the mallet a cooler look and also a smaller end to hit smaller things more accurately. But I should have just stuck with the sanding because I got a catch at the end and the workpiece went flying. I think it hit me in the head, but I can't really remember. I decided to cut my losses and move on. I put the head back on the lathe and finished up the sanding process. Now that my submarine-looking mallet head was off the lathe for good, I could cut the ends off at the miter saw. I made this little jig that would ensure it was held square to the blade and cut the ends off. Next, I needed to make the handle. I found a piece of 8/4 maple in my scrap bucket and got it prepared for the lathe. After getting it into round, I marked my tenon length. Using the same method as before, I turned the tenon down to 1 inch in diameter, which needs to match the mortise that I drilled earlier. I took this slowly because I could always take more material off if the fit wasn't right. And with that said, the first fit was a little too snug, so I put the piece back on the lathe, shaved off a little bit of material, and tried the fit again. This time it was just about perfect. Then I could move on to shaping the handle. I wanted it to be comfortable to hold, so I would periodically turn off the lathe and try it out. There's really no right or wrong way to making something like this, which is why it's a lot of fun. Once the tenon is sized properly, you can make the handle whatever you want. After sanding up to 320 grit, I could awkwardly cut the handle free. Then it was time for the glue up. I used regular wood glue for this and applied it pretty conservatively. A sliding joint like this generally creates a lot of squeeze out, so I try to minimize that some. With the two pieces together, I was able to wipe away any of the excess glue with a wet paper towel. Because I cut the handle free, the end had to be shaped and smoothed. I used the orbital sander on a low speed with 150 grit paper to do most of the work. Then I came back with 220 grit paper on my sanding sponge to smooth it out. Oftentimes, a mallet like this will have a wedge in the tenon to lock it into place. The glue does a lot of the work, but a wedge provides a mechanical hold. Instead of doing that, I decided to add a brass pin. I drilled a 1/4 inch hole through the head at the drill press, then mixed up some 5-minute epoxy before installing the brass pin. I cut this pin at the miter saw slightly oversized so that it would be proud of either surface. After the epoxy dried, I cleaned up both ends of the brass pin with some sandpaper. Both sides sit about a 32nd of an inch proud and have a slightly pillowed look. To prevent the mallet from doing too much damage to things it hits, I glued on some leather to both ends. I used Titebond liquid hide glue for this, applying to both the leather and the mallet. Then I used my bench vise to apply clamping pressure while the glue set up. After about an hour in the vise, I cut off the excess leather with a little utility knife. At first, I tried cutting around the ends in a circle, but it was much easier to take many straight cuts and then come back with some sandpaper to clean up any of the remaining points. The last step was to apply some finish. So far, I've only applied a single coat of walnut oil. I didn't raise the grain because I won't mind if this mallet gets a slightly rough texture over time. I can always come back later and re-oil it if needed. This was a quick little one-day build. It's fun to do projects like this every now and again. This is a welcome addition to the parillaworks mallet family. The maple handle had some surprisingly curly figure to it, and the Cocobolo head is dense and heavy, which is perfect for a project like this. The brass pin not only looks nice, but it provides a mechanical hold should the glue fail. I'm sure I'll be back in a few months to make an even smaller mallet when I decide this one is too heavy. Until then, thanks for watching.